Welcome back to Radio Entrepreneurs. I'm producer Nathan Gobes, filling in for Jeffrey Davis this morning. I want to thank everyone for tuning in and listening. We've had over 8,000 guests on the show and counting. But up next, we've got a returning guest, one of our regulars, Tom McNulty of Lando and Anastasi. Welcome, Tom.
Hi, Nathan. It's good to be back.
Thanks. Always good to have you here. Talk about IP and trademark litigation and issues that business owners face related to all that. Why don't you tell us what you want to talk about today?
Okay, today I kind of wanted to talk about, there's been obviously over the last 10 years or so an explosion of online sales entities, Alibaba, Amazon, eBay, things like that. And one of the things that I've seen in looking at intellectual property litigation in Massachusetts is sort of a growth of lawsuits that surround the sale of trademark stuff, trademark goods that are actually made by the trademark owner, but the sales are not authorized, and what you can do to prevent the unauthorized sale of your goods online. There's a number of reasons you may want to do this. Unauthorized resellers may have, they may undercut your seller's pricing. They may offer shoddy service and lead to negative reviews. Obviously, whatever it is that they're up to is out of your control. And as the trademark owner, you want to maintain as much control as you can. One of the problems that people face and entities face when trying to deal with this sort of thing is in trademark law, there's a doctrine known as the first sale doctrine that basically says once the trademark owner sells a good bearing the trademark, they lose control of that good and they can't prevent its resale. They can't prevent its further use, and they can't prevent the use of the trademark name in association with it. And the idea is, trademark law, at least theoretically, is intended to prevent customer confusion. And how can the customer be confused if they're actually buying an authentic, made by the owner good? But fortunately, there is an exception that is not super hard to come by, and that is the first sale doctrine does not apply when there is a material difference between the good that's being sold and the good that you, the trademark owner, provides. Excuse me. A difference is considered material if it's something that would influence a purchasing decision by a customer. And the courts have interpreted material differences fairly broadly. It doesn't have to be all that much of a difference. Material differences can include, obviously, physical things. There have been differences in battery life, differences in the makeup or the variety or the composition of the product or the formulation, or blend of product, alterations to packaging, removal of reference numbers, SKUs, barcodes have been found to be sufficient. Differences in package shape and labels, differences in language, for example, differences of, alterations of warning labels or changes to warning labels. And you run into this a lot, like with electronic goods, because one of the frequent ways that these unauthorized sales occur is purchasing of products that were intended for, like, the European market, for example, that run on a different voltage system than American products. There are also non-physical material differences, and this is probably the one that it's easiest to come by as a seller or as a trademark holder. Changes to operator manuals, changes to service plans, availability or unavailability of warranty coverage and exchange coverage. And differences in quality control have all been found sufficient to take you out of the material differences. I mean, to take you out of the first sale realm and to qualify. Right. So one of the ways that you can structure your business to at least be able to go after these people and stop their sales is to set up sort of a contractual agreement with your reseller. Set up basically a stable of authorized resellers. Provide them with some training, provide them with requirements that they only sell to end users and not resell to other sellers. And then do things like limit warranty coverage to only sales from authorized resellers, limit exchanges to only those from authorized resellers. and that gives you sufficient grounds to go after some of these companies, excuse me, and stop their resale of your stuff. It also potentially gives you another claim if you file a lawsuit, in that if you have a contract with your authorized sellers that they not sell to other sellers, and they do, you can go after the ultimate, trademark infringer also for tortious interference with your contractual relations with your authorized resellers.
Interesting. I do know a little bit about this in that, I come from a background in the camera industry, and I know that these kinds of issues are often prevalent in that industry. Cameras are high-priced items.
Yep.
The part that you mentioned about being resold in different markets, EU, Asia, being resold in the US, is sometimes a big issue. I think they call that the gray market.
Yes.
Rather than black market, they call it gray market. How easy is it for a business owner to get results on filing these claims against these kinds of people? At least in my mind, you have to expect that, or I would expect that a lot of these resellers are, they're hiding somewhere online. They don't necessarily have as much of a physical entity as a normal business might. And so how do you go after these people?
Yeah, you're correct on all of those things. Couple of things that help in that. One of the tricks with going after these sort of anonymous online entities is finding some place to serve a complaint on them. And courts have become much more open to allowing service through like the Amazon email service or the eBay contact point. So it makes it a little bit easier to get the suit actually kicked off, excuse me, and initiated. And one of the things you typically see, there's a company in Massachusetts. I shouldn't say in Massachusetts, they're not a Massachusetts company, but there's a company called Ecobee that makes like smart thermostats and kind of home controls, things like that, that has brought at this point 13 or 14 different suits of this nature in Massachusetts over the last, 2 years or so. And of the ones I've looked at, there's one that was still pending. There's one that was settled. And in all the rest, they were able to get default judgment, which means the other side didn't appear. And default judgment is fine, but the key factor is they were able to get a permanent injunction, which when the defendant doesn't appear, the court does still have to look at the complaint and determine whether or not there's sort of sufficient factual allegations that would support an injunction. So basically, they're giving it, and their basis was almost entirely on the unavailability of warranty service. So that, the courts, and it's a number of different judges in Massachusetts that have dealt with these, and all of them have determined that that's a sufficient material difference to bring this into that area. You do see this like in the electronics realm a lot. And I'm not sure if that's because that's a more relevant or more prevalent area where this takes place, or if it just so happens that they tended to have their business structures already in place that enable them to bring these kinds of complaints. But it's basically like it's applicable to anything, where there's price differentiation. If you're selling goods in America for more than in other countries, where the profit from a gray market kind of situation arises. The other ways you'll sometimes run into this, you'll have, one of your authorized resellers will go bankrupt and whatever inventory they have is liquidated and just pops up on eBay. That sort of thing. So the main areas I've seen it's electronics. I've seen, some cases involving like dietary supplements where the formulations might have been different, or the quality control wasn't there. If you have something that needs to be stored at a particular temperature, you don't want somebody out there doing who knows what and selling it under your name. So those are kind of the areas that I've really seen the most action, with these types of cases.
So can the courts get Amazon or eBay or whoever to shut down these resellers?
Yeah, once you've got the injunction, you can go to the the different online marketplaces and use that as leverage to shut them down. The other thing that does make it somewhat advantageous these days is sometime within the last year, but fairly recently, Amazon has started making it more of a requirement that the actual selling entity be identifiable. So it's a little, at least on Amazon, it's a little bit harder to be purely anonymous. You know, so that sort of works in your favor too. These are not necessarily suits that you're going to make a lot of money on, because you still have to then try to collect.
Right.
But getting the injunction and then getting the online marketplace to take some action is becoming a little bit easier to do. You know, a lot of the online entities are taking this fairly seriously themselves. They're not looking, you know, Amazon. It doesn't do Amazon any good for you to buy stuff on Amazon and be unhappy with it. Because it's an improper sale. So they've got an interest in sort of helping out with this too, and they're sort of doing what they can.
Yeah, and I can imagine, even though there may not be a lot of monetary gain to be had from these cases, there's, you know, prevention of monetary loss due to sales to, you know, on unauthorized resellers instead of, you know, the proper channels. Yeah,
well, I certainly think there's the monetary loss, but I think probably the biggest factor that would drive you to do this is protection of your reputation. You know, one of the ways you discover that people are doing this is you start getting negative reviews on your legit Amazon page, and you wonder, well, geez, I don't recall selling to that person, or I don't recall having that issue. So that's one of the ways you'll typically first discover this is taking place.
That makes sense. That makes sense. Well, Tom, that's a very interesting conversation, and I'm sure something that will continue to develop as our world gets more interconnected and online sales continue to grow. If business owners, individuals, listeners, and viewers want to get in touch with you, find out more about this topic, how Lando and Anastasi can help them, or any other IP or trademark questions, how could they reach you?
Well, they can get to our website. It's www.lalaw.com, of all things. And they get me individually. They can get me at tkmcnulty@lalaw.com.
Great. I want to thank you for coming back on Radio Entrepreneurs. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
If you could edit that one differently, it's tmcnulty@lalaw.com. Okay.
Sure. I want to thank you for returning to Radio Entrepreneurs. We always love having you on, and look forward to having you back on the show.
Thank you.
And remind everyone, this is Radio Entrepreneurs. All right, let me